You demonstrate charisma by starting with warmth. And you show warmth in one way. You say what you like, you praise, and you say what you would like. You make constructive suggestions. You never say what you don't like. That puts people off.
So charismatic people aren't typically expressively negative. Is that another way to say that?
Yeah, they're positive and optimistic. And especially with the negativity in the world, Todd, I think it impresses people. It differentiates you.
Hi, everybody. Todd Jason here, and welcome to this exciting episode of Untapped. I'm super excited for this one because we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is charisma and magnetism and how to have more enriching and deep relationships with other people. And we could not have a better guest for this, somebody who has made his career being charismatic. And I'm going to let Lauren Weinstein, my podcast host, share more about who Glenn is because she's worked with him very closely. But I'll start off by saying that he's worked for the New York Times for 25 years. He's been an editor, a writer. He has managed and supervised people that have won 10 Pulitzer Prizes. So he knows a thing or two about how to communicate effectively. And what I invite you to do is to get out a notepad because things are going to pop today. You're going to have real insights about how to improve a relationship, how to say something that you don't know how to say. And that's the goal of what we're doing here today. And really the more general goal of Untapped. We're interested in helping you get better in the ways that you need to get better at. So today's episode could not be more on point. Super excited to have Glenn. And Lauren, I'll go ahead and let you share the rest.
He's also a beloved professor at Stanford Business School. In 2020, he won the Distinguished Teaching Award. And what's impressive overall above everything is that he gets consistent 5-star reviews quarter after quarter, which is completely unheard of. Like the top instructors get 4.7, 4.8, 4.9. He's consistent 5s every quarter because he's just such a master at the art of connection and really better than anyone I've ever met at connecting with people. He has some great stories and examples he can share with you today. So to start, we'd love to hear, Glenn, how would you define charisma? How do you think about it?
Well, first, Todd and Lauren, thank you. Todd, I'm just getting to know, but Lauren, I've worked with for 8 years, and she's been an amazing coach for me. So I want you to know you're in good hands. Charisma to me is a personality that charms others, that makes your colleagues and your patients and your customers want to work with you and have coffee with you. They want to work with you because they know that you're not only charming, but you're competent. And you're confident, to use a word that Lauren's been using earlier. And they want to have coffee with you because they know you're delightful. And I think that's the more important part of it. You demonstrate charisma by starting with warmth. And you show warmth in one way. You say what you like, you praise, and you say what you would like. You make constructive suggestions. You never say what you don't like. That puts people off.
So charismatic people don't say what they don't like. Charismatic people aren't typically expressively negative. Is that another way to say that?
Yeah, they're positive and optimistic. And especially with the negativity in the world, Todd, I think it impresses people. It differentiates you.
Do you have some examples of that? A student or someone you've interviewed who you thought just did that so well and gracefully?
Yeah, I will talk about why charismatic people are beloved. And if I may, I'll give you some examples of charismatic people. The first thing I'll say about charismatic people is that they are people who make it all about you rather than all about themselves. So many people don't do that. They always steer the conversation to themselves. Enough about you. Let's talk about me. People like this, right? The most beloved and charismatic people begin with questions. In other words, enough about me. Let's talk about you. And my most beloved colleague at Stanford Business School, the most popular professor by far, is Irv Grousbeck. Irv is almost 90 years old, and is one of the most successful businessmen in America. So he has every reason to brag about himself, but he never does. Instead, he asks questions and listens and listens and listens. And if you ask, you get some sensible advice. I always say Irv is my therapist. Listen, listen, listen. People will love you for it. And then second, charismatic people try to solve problems and help you solve your problems. One of my favorite examples is I worked at the New York Times with a reporter named Connie Hayes, and she was beloved. How beloved? Connie died of cancer at 44, and 2,000 people packed the church where we had the service for her. And she was devilishly funny, but she was also a problem solver. So, for example, she was the commissioner of her kids' soccer league. I don't know how many of you have kids who play soccer, but you probably know that the parents in said leagues are very competitive people. And that means that if they're not happy with the referees, they scream at the referees. So Connie had a problem because there was one dad in particular who kept screaming at the referees. And all the other parents say, "What do we do?" Connie said, "I got it. We're going to make him the commissioner of referees." They stopped screaming because he was the commissioner of referees. So she helped all the parents solve their problems. So then, third, beloved people are connectors. So they're always introducing you to people who can help you, right? There's not that many people like that, but when you know people like this, they're wonderful. I have a Stanford colleague named Allison Kluger who teaches communications, and the students adore her. Why? She knows a lot of important people, and she eagerly introduces her students to the many people in her network who could help them. That's why they love her. She's helped me big time. I call her the connector. So make connections for people. They will love you for it. And then finally, beloved people are generous with praise. They make your day with an email that compliments you or says thank you. I encourage my students to write at least one email of gratitude every day. And I say, don't send it to people who always get emails like that. Send it to people who never get emails like that. Like maybe your elementary school or middle school teacher, when you were too clueless to realize how wonderful they were. How about sending them a note today? And they do this, and it's amazing the response they get. And as you all know, the more generous you are, the more it lifts you too. You write to your middle school teacher, and he or she writes back and says, "I can't believe you found me and wrote me. I've had a really difficult year." Often they're retired, and your email meant so much to me. So write an email, or the house cleaner, or I tell a student, here's somebody you could write a gratitude email to, your parents. And they say, "Oh yeah, I guess so." So really, people are charismatic if they know how to praise. So in summary, listening, 1, 2, helping others solve problems, 3, connecting people, and 4, praising people. And I'll finish with one thing. So what all these things have in common is that you are giving rather than taking. And people appreciate givers more than takers. There's a street artist from Britain, I think, called Banksy, and he once said, "They say you die twice. The first time you die is when you stop breathing. The second time is when somebody says your name for the last time." If you are a giver, people will be saying your name a lot longer than if you are a taker.
Well, it's beautiful. Thank
I
you.
gotta say, that's some gold right there, Glenn. Really, really beautiful. And I want to just ask one follow-up question around that, because I think as I'm hearing this, and probably y'all listening, are, yes, that makes sense. And we know when we're around somebody like that has a generosity of spirit, that leads with gratitude, that asks those questions, we tend to like them. We tend to want to be around them. The question that I have is, when we're also living in this fast-paced world where there are things that we need, and I don't want to say they're the things that we need to take, but they're things that we need to get done. Does being this way in your experience, does having this level of charisma, which is really all about giving, somehow magically also lead to us receiving the things that we need? Because it sometimes feels that when I hear this, I'm like, this is great, but how do I also make sure that I accomplish and achieve and do the things that I need to do? Is there a relationship with being this way and also doing things and getting things done?
It's an investment, Todd, like anything else. It sometimes doesn't pay off immediately. It does pay off often. Well, people will remember and they'll help you when you need help. So that's the one thing. The other thing is that what it does help immediately is make you feel better, because I'm sure you guys have talked about this. Giving can be quite delightful, and many people feel better about giving than about taking. So you feel better just having done something nice for someone. And I think that helps you get through your day.
And a few things I wanted to touch on that you said. One, charisma actually isn't about what we do. It's about how we make others feel, right? Which is exactly what you're saying. You feel so good around charismatic people because they're listening to you. They're helping you solve their problems. They're giving you gratitude and appreciation. Like, who wouldn't want to be around someone like that? And Glenn and I both tended to be friends with the students. And they say the same thing. The professors who seem like they don't care, they're just doing a job, they get in and out, versus the ones who are really going above and beyond, really sitting with students, giving advice, really showing up, makes a huge difference. And one important thing to add is research backs up what Glenn is saying as well. There's a great book called Give and Take around who gets ahead in life. Is it givers or takers? And it's actually a sandwich. So there's like bottom givers, takers, and then takers at the givers at the top who have so much rich reward and fulfillment. And the difference between the givers at the bottom and top, part of it was, what is your intention when you give? Are you giving out of fear, like I won't be liked or the person will be upset? Or is it truly out of the goodness of your heart, pure generosity? If you're giving to get, that's not really giving, right? It's like actually pure, I'm here to serve and make others feel good around me and have gratitude. And also, it can take a little bit longer time, right? Like you're developing, when you have one interaction, maybe that's enough, but it's over time. Glenn, who I've known for 9 years now, is like such a giver and so generous and so kind. Like the second he asks me for anything, it's of course 1,000%. And he has now, I'm sure 1,000 people that would do the same for him because how he shows up in his life. So
is that why you've spoken to my class 25 times over the past 5 years? Like, that must be the reason, Lauren. Okay, yes. I think it was Maya Angelou, the author, who said, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So true. So true.
As you're saying this, I remember a moment in my own life. And really, as you're listening to this, like think about times when you've been that version of yourself, overly generous, overly kind, giving praise, and try to remember if it came back and you felt better and you made others feel better. And I told Lauren this story a while back, but when I first moved to San Francisco, I had this neighbor who I didn't know at the time was notoriously known as one of the most difficult people to live around in San Francisco. There was articles written in the SF Chronicle about her. Like she was a huge complainer. If you had to do any construction around the house, she would be like incredibly difficult. And of course, when I first met her a couple of times on the street, she wasn't very friendly, etc. And then one day I saw her in the coffee shop right down the street, and I was trying to talk to her, and I said, "Hey," she ordered a coffee. I'm like, "Hey, let me get that." She's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I'll buy your coffee. I'll buy you coffee. You're my neighbor. I just moved in." And she was so stunned. She looks at me and she goes, "In 29 years of living in San Francisco, no one has ever bought me a coffee." I was just like, "What?" I'm like, "Well, here you go. It's your first time." And it was really good. We made this like little connection that actually lasted the whole time that I was living there, to the point when we had this really big party for my wife's 40th birthday. she let it go. And then finally, like 2 a.m, she came over, knocked on the door and said, okay, I think that's enough. And my other neighbors were stunned that she had let it go on past 9 p.m. So it's really interesting to hear this. And also remember that we've already all done this. And so we've had experiences where we've been this way. And Glenn, I'm actually curious about how you think about connecting with people when you're meeting them for the first time. So you don't have an existing relationship. It could be a new client or someone at a social gathering. How do you think about building rapport or connection with somebody when it's brand new?
Yeah, Todd, I always start with warmth. And if you can, humor. So some of you are going to say, oh, I'm not funny. Okay, you don't have to be funny. Almost anyone, though, can make someone else smile if you say the right thing. So be less self-conscious about being truly funny and then just focus on what can I say that will make a warm connection. So when I speak to a group, I only feel comfortable, like you, once I have made them laugh, which I haven't done yet. So maybe I shouldn't feel comfortable yet. But so one time I remember I worked for the New York Times, I still do, and it is not a popular publication among conservatives. And I was asked to speak to a group of very conservative older people. And I looked out at the 200 of them and they were not smiling. They were at a lunch, so they had to be there. And they didn't particularly want to hear from me. So I looked at them and I said, you guys remind me of the guy, the 82-year-old reader who wrote to the New York Times and said, New York Times, I have been reading your paper for 75 years, and I've always hated it. And they all roared with laughter, and then everything loosened up. So whatever you can do to make people smile, there's so much resentment and mistrust in the world, but if you can make them smile, they're much more likely to connect with you. To meaningfully connect, in addition to make them smile, be positive, be constructive. So I'm back to say what you like and say what you would like, not what you don't like. So my colleague at the Times, Tom Friedman, said a long time ago that people will watch you and they're going to say, does this person want me to succeed? In which case I'll listen to everything they say. Or does this person want me to fail? In which case I'm going to ignore them. And often, if it's your colleagues, go over your head or go around you. So just be sure your colleagues know you want them to succeed. My favorite example is Steve Jobs. So I love this guy. I was lucky enough to know him, and I met him several times. And when he was already very ill, my boss said, hey, let's invite Steve to our company offsite and see what advice he has. Because we were at the time struggling to go online, struggling to create nytimes.com. A lot of people were saying, no, we're going to stick with the print newspaper. Well, that's folly. You can see that today. But 12 years ago, it wasn't. So we invited Steve. I said, my boss, he's not going to come because he's in California. We're in New York. And his doctor said, you just had a liver transplant. You can't leave California. We called him up. He said, I'm coming. He comes to the New York Times. The first thing he said was, I love the New York Times. You're a national treasure. The nation needs you. It was clear he wanted us to succeed. So we would listen to anything he said after that. And then instead of saying, you idiots, which he was famous for saying, by the way, Steve, he was a tough cookie. Instead of saying, you idiots, you have bungled your effort to go online, he said, hey, you guys, here's what you need to do to go online. You need to make it easier for people to sign up. They're willing to pay some money, but they don't want to have to give their mother's next of kin and all this other information. And he said, I have this service called iTunes. Have you heard of it? Okay, a little sarcastic. We had heard of it. He said, make it as easy to sign up as iTunes. So he was saying what he would like instead of saying, you idiots. He never said, you idiots. So instead of dwelling on our mistakes, he talked about how we could attract readers online. He was so constructive, and I'll never forget his positivity. And he knew he was dying. This was 18 months before he died. And I will never forget that in spite of that, he was so positive. He was so constructive. I think of this guy every day still 12 years later. One way to be positive when you're dealing with your colleagues, with your customers, with your friends. So this comes from my longtime boss at the New York Times, Dean Baquet. So Dean always says, try to say yes rather than no. If you're not thrilled with an idea, instead of saying no, say yes, but what if? And then help find a compromise in the middle. Yes, but what if we tried this? Now might say, okay, that wouldn't work. And then you say, yes, but what if we tried this? And it's clear that you're trying to come to a solution with them rather than just dismissing them out of hand. People hate it when you dismiss them out of hand, as you know it. So this is all back to being positive in construction. Finally, you can meaningfully connect by looking someone in the eye and assuring them that they have your full attention. So Lauren calls this presence. So she's a master at it. I know somebody else who is a master at it. Bill Clinton. I met him once. He looked me straight in the eye. I'm thinking, I'm the least important person in the room. Why isn't he looking over my shoulder? No. He treated me like I was the only person on the planet. People notice when, especially, don't start doing this stuff. If you start looking at your phone, it's so insulting to people. But just show them, you are the center of my universe right now. I'm looking at you and nobody else. People will appreciate that. So Todd, I think that gets to, and my summary was, I took notes to make sure I said it right. Begin with warmth. Say what you like and would like, not what you don't like. Try to say yes and show people you have their full attention and they have your full attention.
I wanted to add to the yes and, or say yes. I went to a product leader conference, and one of the product leaders was saying he struggled for so many years in his career because it was always so combative with the CEO. The CEO would want something. He's like, no, we can't do that. And they'd always argue, or the engineering team. And he just really struggled. And then a mentor said, say yes, right? And then, and beyond that, right? So yes, we can do that. And just so you know, here are the downsides, or just so you know, here's what could go wrong. So everyone loved this guy. He's like, after that, amazing relationships. I was just saying yes to everyone and then just showing them the other side. But it seemed like it's not resistance. I'm not defending. I'm with you, right? And let's explore and let's look at all the other sides. That simple phrase changed all his relationships.
Yes, but have you thought about this? That's what people really appreciate.
It makes so much sense when you say it, and we can experience that in others. And then it's about actually practicing this. The yes and, which is one of the main tenets of improv comedy. It's always a yes and, which is a really great practice, by the way, for those of you who do really want to get better in communication. And I just love the simplicity of your framework, Glenn. I feel like we're just really learning, like, very straightforward how to be charismatic, and the recommendations are just really, really clear.
We often think of charismatic people as they have so much energy and they're showing up fully. Well, how do you think about, let's say I'm more introverted or shy, or I'm just tired. I'm like exhausted and depleted from the day. Like, how do we show up in that way when it feels a little more challenging in time?
Great question.
Yeah.
Ask questions. People don't ask enough questions. If you're really tired, as long as they're not complaining too much, it's easier to listen than to lecture. So if you ask questions, you will, first of all, might find out something interesting, but also you're showing your presence, even though you're not feeling up to speaking a lot yourself.
Way less energy intensive to sit and ask questions and hear, and you got to cut to turn off, which is nice as well. Yeah.
And sometimes, by the way, Lauren, asking questions, you re-energize. Because then they'll say something interesting, and then you'll say, actually, I want to know more about that. Before you know it, you're feeling peppier.
And also, she was saying when you're tight on time, but I think even just acknowledging that, right? I'm like, Glenn, it's so good to see you. I'd so love to connect. I only have 10 minutes, but we have 10. Let's do it. Like, my friend will always say that to me if she's tight on time with kids or whatever's going on. So how can we show presence and care, even if it's fit into a short amount of time?
I mean, this really is a mindset shift, right? And I think there are people out there in the world that just do a lot of these things naturally. And now we're here talking to Glenn to talk about what are the traits, what are the qualities, what are the practices that we can learn to do this. It's a choice that if you're tired, that you can ask questions. It's a choice. It's a practice to remember to do it. And he's absolutely that practice of you're really tired, you're depleted, you don't know how to create a connection or rapport with somebody, then you ask questions. Oftentimes it's in that process where you get pepped up. The energy kind of floods back in. And then you're able to speak with more clarity, more excitement, more presence with the other person. It's a superpower to be able to have the mindset of curiosity, of asking questions all the time. And Glenn, I'm curious with you because you've not only found meaningful success, but you're also one of the happiest and most fulfilled people that we know. I know Lauren has shared this with me, that just in general, like just being around you, you emanate this quality of being happy and fulfilled. What would you say is your personal secret around that? How have you found the ability to hit that sweet spot of both being successful in the world and also being fulfilled? You have both pieces, which I think is elusive for many of us.
So I guess if you're going to take one thing away, gang, from this entire hour, it would be what I'm just about to say, which is I've learned, Todd, to remember the following. When the Lord closes a door, somewhere he opens a window. Does anybody remember where that comes from? Sound of Music, Maria, exactly. Helen Keller said something similar. When one door of happiness closes, another opens. But often we look so long at the closed door, we do not see the one that's been opened for us. That's so true and so important. And in my life, that's what's been transformative. 10 years ago, I left my full-time job at the New York Times to move to San Francisco for a woman I expected to marry. And when she changed her mind, I was suddenly, how do you put this? Oh yeah, homeless and jobless. And my financial advisor, by the way, calls me American Idiot, the Green Day song, American Idiot. He said, I've had many clients ruined by gambling and women. You're the only one I know who was ruined by gambling on a woman. So this was the lowest point in my life. I couldn't sleep for months. I cried a lot. A door had indeed been closed, but one had also been opened. Desperate for a job, I found teaching practical writing at Stanford Business School. And 2,500 plus students later, I feel like the luckiest guy on the planet. And I found the marvelous woman who is now my wife and many new and delightful friends like Lauren. And so that new door was opened quite wide. And so just look for that open door. And as Helen Keller said, remember, you can't just look for the open door. You have to stop looking back at the closed door. It took me almost 5 years to stop looking back to that woman in San Francisco. Until you stop looking back, it's hard to move forward effectively. And then finally, I tell my students, if you want to be happy, 3 words: expel toxic relationships. Expel toxic relationships. There are a few people who always make you feel bad about yourself. You know who they are. You dread it because you know you're going to feel terrible when you finish with them. Expel them. End those relationships and replace them with 5, 10, or even 50 nourishing ones. That's my secret to happiness.
One thing that I think is so interesting about you too, because maybe everyone talks about work-life balance. Like, I have all this free time, and maybe you work a lot of hours. Just share with them like how much you work, the grading, the feedback, what you do before class starts. Like, it's a lot, but then given all the time you're putting in, you also make time for people and walks and family. And like, how do you think about balance?
Much more fun than looking at my phone. That's how I feel about it. Or watching television. I work every day of the year, sometimes an hour, sometimes 18 hours, and I love what I do. That's what Steve Jobs said. He always said, you got to love what you do. And if you don't love what you do for your main job, in college, they would say your main job is your major. You need a minor. You need a subject separate from your major, a hobby or a passion separate from your main job that you love doing. And love what you do, and then you can work forever.
Do you have something in your life that's giving you energy and fueling you? Because we're putting out a lot. So have something, whether that's your job or something on the side, that's fueling you in return just because you love it so much.
I haven't thought about this before, but I'd say the desire to please. And if you're always working to please somebody, and it keeps you young. So I just wrote a column in the New York Times a month ago. I said that when Social Security was started in 1935, most people didn't live to be 65, which was the retirement age. Now, the retirement age in Social Security is 62. And a lot of people live into their 90s. So they're spending a third of their adult lives retired and on Social Security. I guess they'd say, well, I worked hard. I deserve that. 30 years is a long time not to do anything constructive. And I do think if people contributing strengthens you, it's giving strengthens you, taking weakens you, even though it might seem the opposite. So I'm encouraging my generation, keep going. And they're saying, well, okay, I hated my job. Okay, then find something else. And if you can afford to, volunteer, but do something that makes other people feel good, because that'll make you feel good.
Mm-hmm. The samurai say that too. So thousands of years of wisdom, they're saying the exact same thing. They'll show us we're physically stronger when we're protecting, when we're giving, we feel better.
And when we're of service. And I can tell you personally speaking, that was big. My father's biggest problem in life was he retired early and he didn't have a plan for after. And it really destroyed him mentally and emotionally. He's still living, but he's really struggled with that. And my response has been exactly what you said, which is, how can I create a career which I'll always be doing it? I'll evolve, things will change, but it'll be something that I do hopefully until the day that I go with some level of joy and fulfillment. So I love that you're doing that and you're teaching that to the generations. And I have a question, because you received such high reviews in your class, 5-star reviews. You won a teaching award at Stanford School of Business, right? Mm-hmm. You get this amazing positive response from your students. I'm wondering two things. Number one is, when you teach a class and you're with your students, what is your intention? How are you holding your job with them? And then what do you think is leading to this incredible response that you get from them that lets you win awards?
So I'm actually, Todd, older, not only than my students' parents, but older than a lot of their grandparents. And I think the students view me as that curmudgeonly uncle at the Thanksgiving table, the guy who's always saying things that seem incomprehensible and talking about movies and television shows that were made decades before they were born. I mentioned Car 54 and Dobie Gillis in my classes. Those shows were made in the 50s and 60s. The students look at me like I'm talking about ancient Constantinople. So I think they see me as a quirky, let's just use the word weird guy, but I think they appreciate the course because practical writing is so relevant to people. I'm sure for you too. And they really want skills they can use in the workplace. They're not that interested in academic research. They want to be leaders. And as I always tell them, you have to show you're a great leader through the way you write, not just the way you speak. You can reach far more people through the way you write. So they do things like they write emails and cold call letters, which is very important to them. I mentioned the notes of gratitude to people they should have thanked years ago, like their middle school teachers. They write opinion pieces, many of which are published in the New York Times and the Washington Post. And I don't think they expected when they came to a business school to be writing opinion pieces for the Washington Post. And they learn to write effective feedback, which, by the way, and I'm sure all of you out in the workplace, you rise or fall on how well you deliver feedback. And I tell the students, you guys aren't interested in this because you're not managing people yet. But when you are, and when you're dealing with people in a large workplace, how you give them feedback will make all the difference. They will follow you or run away from you. And oh, by the way, if you want them to follow you, say what you like and say what you would like. Yeah, I'm back to that again. I keep coming back to that. And then I think they appreciate that I give them detailed feedback on every assignment. And frankly, we use a lot of humor in the class. They like to laugh as much as I do.
I think what I would say makes you so beloved is one, you're just so authentic, right? Some people might be afraid. They think I'm weird. What if I mention something from the 50s? Are they too young for that? Or what if I make this joke, right? So much in life, we're so cautious and overthinking, and we're so worried what other people will think. But you're like, I'm going to do this and play a funny video. And you're like, you're just so yourself. So your intention isn't to be liked. Your intention is to just show up and enjoy what you're doing and also be of service.
What if the reality is that we do have to tolerate, for whatever reasons we may have, a very difficult person in our lives? How would you approach that? Is there anything extra that we can do?
I had a boss like this at the New York Times. He took over, and his first thing he said was, I'm going to replace Glenn Kramon in his job. And I had a staff of 100 people, and I said, I owe it to them to do the best I can by them until he replaces me. And so I never lost my cool. I never complained. I worked my hardest to do well by them. And what happened is they came to my support, and he was fired. And that's what often happens, is if someone is really difficult, I don't know what the odds are, but they're pretty good that the staff will revolt. And then they'll push that person out. So I survived, and this guy was fired.
All right. Well, that's all the time that we have for today in this episode. And we just want to stop and really thank Glenn for coming on here and sharing his extensive wisdom and experience when it comes to having more charisma. I know that if you listen to this entire episode, that you took away at least 3 things that will help you more deeply connect with others in your lives, and learning how to have more open and magnetic conversations was really at the heart of this. We're all here, we're all in this together, and we're just glad that we had the opportunity to interview and talk with Glenn. And please subscribe if you haven't already. We're just so excited about our upcoming episodes and just so much more going on with what we're doing. And we hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead. Thanks so much.